This is a story of the vanishing legacy of an American dream. It is a portrait of a third-generation alfalfa farmer in Southern California and the obstacles preventing the continuation of the legacy to be passed down to the subsequent fourth generation. Several decades ago, thousands of acres of alfalfa fields blanketed the Antelope Valley in Southern California. Hundreds of farmers resided there, harvesting their crop. But then they slowly disappeared, leaving vacant landscapes of former alfalfa farms. Some moved away to grow alfalfa in out-of-state locations, citing water availability and restrictions, increased taxation, and escalating electricity rates. Some just forfeited their dream and pursued passionate endeavors elsewhere. But some stayed. This is one story of a third-generation alfalfa farmer whose legacy was passed down from his grandfather and father, but sadly now, to continue this farming legacy to his 11-year-old son for a fourth generation appears unlikely and unsustainable.
My name is Casey Alesso. I'm a third-generation farmer from the Antelope Valley area of Southern California. My grandfather came over here from Italy and started farming in the Tehachapi area in 1922. From then on, the farming lifestyle was passed down to my father, who started farming on his own when he was actually a teenager in high school. I became a farmer after him, the only of 6 children in our family that became a farmer. I started off farming here in the year 2000, leasing this farm and taking over the lease from the neighboring farmer who I worked for. From 2000 to 2005, I had expanded from this 240 acres to 640 acres, all in farming. Then in 2008, the price of doing business for farms essentially more than doubled across the board, especially the #1 expense of farming, which is electricity. Since then, the very next year, the price of hay in 2009 cut in half, and that forced me to get way smaller as a farmer. During the time as I have been getting smaller, there has been increased regulation, increased expenses even more, especially with the electric company, and threats of increasing expenses even more yet. I am now, in 2017, down to 120 acres of farmland. I am trying to stay alive as a farmer. I have my son who helps me out. He's 11 years old. I don't see a fourth-generation farm coming out of this legacy simply because of taxation, regulation, and expenses.
What exemplifies the American spirit more than the iconic farmer on his tractor harvesting his crop? For decades, it portrayed an image that illustrated hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance, a vision associated with an American dream that was foundational in creating prosperity in our country. And now, the story of the discontinuation of this farmer's legacy represents on a wider scale what is presently occurring throughout America today. It is the vanishing legacy of the working middle class. The sustainability of it to prosper and prevail is now in survival mode, getting smaller and smaller, existing on less and less, as described by the farmer facing escalating expenses which exceed profitability and slow growth of his commodity, alfalfa. But this also could apply to many small businesses where increased taxation, regulation, and expenses restrict growth and create a reduction in their profitability.
If you look at the taxes, are kind of unbelievable for farming. You have, of course, self-employment tax. You have a tax on our electricity, believe it or not. That's one of the subcategories of that. We have state income tax. We have federal income tax. We have property tax. We have employee taxes. Oh, and by the way, I had an employee of 10 years that I had to lay off because of being forced to get smaller. So we're taxed kind of ridiculously high, and I think it's multiple times what in the Revolutionary War our forefathers went to war against a tyrannical government. Tyrannical is even too small of a word to me. The regulations keep increasing. Just the other day I got something in the mail from somebody from this county saying that they're an organization that require so much money for a permit each year to burn agricultural waste. Had another one called a CUPA regulation from the state that came up and then told me that to get out of doing burdensome paperwork and filing, which I would have to hire another employee for, which is detrimental to my bottom line trying to stay alive as a farmer, that I would have to have less than 55 gallons of any liquid container containing any fuels or oils. A lot of the farmers, probably from other states, are laughing at this, but this is a reality in the state of California. Another thing I would like to state is farming is tough enough without all these regulations. It's very expensive to plant, to till, to keep equipment running, to keep the bills paid, to do the paperwork, to pay the taxes. But on top of that, we have our normal everyday lives of trying to fight the weather. A windstorm can come in and blow and damage our lines. It can damage our crop or blow our crop away when we're cutting hay. We have critters like gophers that we have to keep after and keep them under control from putting too much dirt in the hay. Squirrels, rabbits that might eat down the hay. Not long ago there was a plague of rabbits actually. Thousands would come in and just take the crop straight down. So I would have to fence to keep them out. So there's a lot of other factors that are not normal to any other job or business, which makes it increasingly difficult. But then to add on all of these other things is quite ridiculous. And coupled with that is farming, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, has consistently, within the past decades, been one of the top 5 most dangerous jobs in America. So you have a dangerous job, you have increased expenses, you have tons of regulation, and the job is difficult enough without all that. And I believe a lot of this is the reason why I have gotten smaller and why there will not be a 4th generation in my son who loves to farm also. Going into the farming life without all that, when it was able to make a profit, made a lot of things easier because you could hire employees, you could have things done. But when you get smaller and smaller, it makes it increasingly difficult to field all of these different types of things that attack your livelihood. And attack, I think, is a great word, because what I feel oftentimes is like I'm a lone person walking through a town and everybody has their guns pointed at me. That's what I feel like being a small farmer in Southern California at this time. I hope to carry on this legacy. I hope to farm. There's a water lawsuit that was brought in by a neighboring county in Los Angeles, and it is a judgment. They're going to be cutting back our water by 60%. They'll start cutting it back within the next couple of years, but it'll be back by 60% within the next 5 years. So I will be out of farming. I don't see any possibility of me still farming after 5 years. It would take a dynamic change in things that are happening government-wise, tax-wise, business-wise, from businesses that keep charging more and more without my product going up more and more in an equal fashion. When I farm hay, you irrigate over 2 irrigations usually. It's usually every 35 days I will cut the hay and then wait for it to cure out and wait for the perfect moisture, which I have known over time to just feel by hand to know that it won't be too wet or too dry. Too dry, the bales just don't flake apart and they fall down and shatter, and which is no good for a customer. Too wet, you can actually put it up and it can overheat inside the bale and burn your whole stack down. So, and I know just by feel, by being a 3rd generation farmer and being raised on a farm, how to feel for the correct moisture of that hay. A lot of the things you have to remember, it's just natural for me, but if you took another person from outside of farming and tried to show them, you couldn't write enough books for them to read and know what to do in a farming situation such as this. And again, this is my life. I do love it. I loved it a lot more without all the increased taxes, with all the increased regulations, all the increased expenses. Now I'm just in survival mode, trying to do what I love until I can't do it anymore, which seems to be in the near future. Hopefully not even near as expenses raise. The electric company tells us that they're looking to raise prices even more. If you look at the electric company's bills, they've learned to divide and conquer. There's probably about 6, 7 or so subcategories in every electric bill, and it seems like at some point at any time one of those subcategories is getting raised. Not necessarily has to be the rate, although they raise those often enough, but it could be some of the other subcategories, such as the taxes or transportation costs or standby fees. Electricity is what we use for our pump motors to pump the water out of the ground for our lines to water the crop. So that is why electricity is our #1 cost. It just seems ridiculous that prices of doing business, parts prices, equipment prices go up to match all these increases, but the cost of my commodity, that being hay, actually goes down. I don't think that it's fair. I believe there should be some sort of action to cause a reversal of a lot of this, especially for the small farmer. A large farmer might be able to survive because they might have heavy backing, they might have many, many more years, and they might have several employees that can take care of the paperwork, the regulations. I just do it all myself, and it's difficult enough doing that without any outside burdensome regulations, taxes, and expenses. Another thing I would like to cover is even the latest increase in registration fees for our vehicle. For farm trucks, the registration fees used to be an astronomical $250 a year for my farm trucks. They have gone up almost double now. And on top of that, they have increased the fuel tax for those trucks here in this state. So that is just another thing that makes it increasingly burdensome. My days when I get up, I usually get up at dawn and I start working, and it's hard to plan out a day because oftentimes there's things that go wrong. A line can break, and then I have to alter my plan or my schedule to repair that line. A piece of equipment can break down, and my equipment is old equipment. I actually have 2 tractors that are from my father, and they are old tractors, one's from the 1960 time and the other one's from 1965. They're still running, but get this, there is a smog regulation on farm equipment in California. It was passed a number of years ago, and it essentially made it to where my farm equipment is worth far less than it used to be, because it used to be a resellable item. Now, with the smog laws, you have to have an increased tier level of smog on your tractors to be able to farm legally. Now, I am in an area that is very clean air, so they have decided not to regulate this area for now, but all it takes is for the government to change their mind, and then my equipment will be regulated to where I would have to put even more money into trying to make my equipment smog legal for this area. Can you see why this is getting from the ridiculous to the sublime? I am just a farmer. This is what is going on in my life. I work every day, get up every day at dawn, try to do my schedule. Equipment can break down. The cost of fixing that can be in excess of $500 a breakdown. Some breakdowns, whether a well or a piece of farm equipment, can easily go $10,000. That's a very scary thing for me, but that's the life I live. I go through, when things break down, it alters my entire schedule. It's not like a normal business. I might have to go into the night working to keep things going. But I do love this work. I love the outside work in the fields, in the country, with the fresh air. It is a very nice thing, but it has become increasingly burdensome to do business here. I find it sad that my son, who just graduated 5th grade, had a yearbook out, and they asked all the kids what they wanted to be, and they held up plaques of what they wanted to be. Some said policemen, some firefighters, some YouTubers or gamers. My son was the only one that held up a plaque saying farmer. And he has grown up on this farm. He loves this farm. But I find it sad that I don't think there's a future in farming for my son. I don't think at this point in time I could encourage him to pursue farming just because of what the outlook or the future looks for a small farmer in not just this country, but especially in this state that we live in today, and with the multitude of difficulties and impossible atmosphere to be able to continue in this type of a business.
Is this the final season in this vanishing legacy? Is this the last planting, the last time of a 35-day cycle that will produce a bountiful alfalfa crop? Will the continuation of this legacy be broken, even though the will and the determination of this farmer perseveres for its sustainability, continuing through subsequent generations? But here's where there is an ironic twist in the final chapter of the waning days of alfalfa farming in the Antelope Valley. Most of the abandoned landscapes of former alfalfa farms are now replaced with solar and wind developments, often referred to, interestingly, as farms. Their purpose is to provide additional energy output to the electrical grid. Ongoing projects include construction of even larger electrical towers, weaving through vacant fields as a high-wire highway carrying electricity through the Antelope Valley and beyond. Future solar development will most likely include remaining acreages of succumbing farms. But here's the real irony, that with all the present and future additional projects providing increased production of electricity, The impact of escalating electricity costs to the alfalfa farming community is the major factor for its inability to survive and ultimately its demise.
I love to farm hay. I love the people who buy the hay. This is my life. I do love it. Now I'm just in survival mode, trying to do what I love until I can't do it anymore. I am a lone person. I just do it all myself. I am just a farmer. This is what is going on in my life. I work every day, get up every day at dawn. I do love this work. I love the outside work in the fields, in the country, with the fresh air. It is a very nice thing. But I find it sad that I don't think there's a future in farming for my son.